The screen opens to a lonely hill swallowed by fog. A thunderstorm brews in the distance. Lightning flashes revealing the silhouette of a ruined Gothic castle, Hollowspire, standing against the wind like a wounded giant. Rain drips from its broken windows, echoing through the empty halls. A man appears, a former Marine named Elias Rowe, walking toward the gates with only a backpack and a German shepherd at his side. His breath fogs in the cold air, his eyes heavy with memories he never speaks of. The villagers say the castle is cursed, but Elias doesn't believe in curses, only in second chances. As he steps through the rusted gate, the storm begins to whisper. In a world that's forgotten how to listen, one man walked into a storm and found a miracle hidden in the silence. Before the story begins, tell me, where are you watching from? Leave your country or city in the comments, and let's start this journey together. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the small courthouse hall, a place that smelled faintly of dust and disuse. Lot 17, Hollowspire Castle, starting bid, $2,000. No one raised a hand. Outside, rain clung to the windows like old sorrow. Inside, silence pressed against the air. Hollowspire had been abandoned for decades, perched on the ridge above Pine Hollow like a scar of black stone against gray skies. Locals said the wind that passed through its broken towers could whisper names of those who never came back. Then, from the back of the hall, a tall man stood up. Elias Rowe, former Marine, 37 years old, broad-shouldered but carrying a quiet weariness that comes from seeing too much. His right hand still bore the faint tremor left by war, his eyes the stillness of someone who had learned to listen before speaking. Beside him, lying obediently at his boots, was a German shepherd named Valor, coat sable gray and eyes alert as firelight. "I'll take it," Elias said simply. The gavel struck wood. "Sold." The road to Hollowspire wound like a serpent through fog. By the time Elias reached the iron gates, night had already set in. The castle rose before him, a Gothic ruin with spires jagged like teeth, its stained glass windows darkened by time, ivy crawling up the stones as though the earth itself sought to reclaim it. "Home, sweet home," Elias muttered, stepping out of the truck. Valor sniffed the air, tail stiff, ears twitching. There was no wind, yet the chimes on the gate rattled softly, like laughter from another century. Inside, dust motes floated in the beam of his flashlight. The great hall was enormous, marble floor cracked with age, portraits hung crooked, and a chandelier hung so low it seemed ready to fall. Yet amid the decay, there was beauty. The bones of craftsmanship, the echo of grandeur, the ghost of a dream someone once believed would last forever. Elias unpacked his few belongings, a sleeping bag, a lantern, and Valor's bowl, and set camp near the old hearth. The first night in Hollowspire felt long, stretched by silence that didn't seem entirely empty. He could hear faint sounds beyond the walls, a sigh, perhaps the settling of wood, or something else. Valor growled once, low and uncertain. Elias placed a hand on the dog's head. "Easy, boy. Just the wind." But Hollowspire had no wind that night. At dawn, fog rolled across the hills, turning the castle grounds into a world of ghosts. Elias walked the perimeter, inspecting the land. Half a dozen acres of tangled vines and dead rose bushes. From here, he could see Pine Hollow in the valley below. A small town, its smoke rising thin and gray into the morning light. That's when he noticed the flowers. A bundle of fresh daisies and white lilies lay at the rusted gate, tied with a silk ribbon, delicate against the iron. The stems were still wet from dew, which meant they'd been placed there only hours ago. Elias frowned. "We've got company, Valor." In town, May Whitaker, owner of Wild Ferns and Blooms, was unlocking her shop when Mrs. Crenshaw from the bakery called out, "You still leaving flowers up there, May? That cursed place doesn't need tending." May only smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. She was in her early 30s, with hazel eyes soft as dusk and auburn hair always tucked behind one ear, a habit she'd had since girlhood. "Some promises," she said, "don't end just because people stop believing." Her fiancé, Robert Ellison, The journalist who vanished near Hollowspire 10 years ago had promised her he'd return with a story that would change everything. Instead, all that returned was silence. So, every week, she left flowers at the gate. That evening, Elias sat near the fire, flipping through a ledger he'd found in the old library, lists of names, dates, and strange symbols beside them. The ink had bled into the paper long ago, but one phrase remained clear. The debt of water must be paid. A chill moved through him, not from the cold. Valor's ears perked up. The dog rose suddenly, growling toward the far wall, a vast tapestry depicting a hunt through the woods. The growl deepened when a faint tap-tap-tap echoed from behind the stones, rhythmic and slow, like a heartbeat made of stone. Elias stood, lantern in hand. "Who's there?" he called, though he already knew no one would answer. The tapping stopped, and from somewhere deep in the castle, too deep, came a whisper. Not words, just breath. Valor pressed close to his leg, trembling but watchful. The marine inside Elias stirred again, instincts honed in war, the sharp alertness of danger unseen. "All right, Hollowspire," he murmured, gripping the lantern tighter. "Let's see what secrets you're hiding." Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the moon, and far away, May Whitaker looked up from her window as her candle flickered once, as if something, somewhere, had just woken up. The third night in Hollowspire began with rain that refused to end. It drummed against the stained glass windows like impatient fingers, slipping through cracks in the stone and whispering down the corridors. Elias sat by the hearth, the flames dim and restless. Valor slept nearby, one paw twitching as though chasing something through his dreams. A sudden thud shattered the silence. The old tapestry in the east corridor had collapsed, revealing a section of wall that looked different, cleaner, less corroded by time. Elias approached cautiously, his flashlight trembling slightly in his grasp. He brushed away dust and grime to reveal the faint outline of a doorway, its frame hidden behind layers of plaster and faded paint. "Good boy," Elias muttered when Valor stood beside him, tail wagging once. "You found something." With a firm push, the edge of the wall groaned and opened inward. A cold draft swept out, heavy with the smell of damp stone and rust. The narrow stairway descended into darkness, its steps slick with moisture. Elias hesitated only for a heartbeat before following the beam of his flashlight downward. Valor padded close behind. At the bottom lay a vaulted chamber carved entirely from black limestone, its air thick and stale. Broken crates and ancient tools were scattered across the floor. In the far corner, half buried under rubble, gleamed a small metal box, locked tight with corroded hinges. Elias pried it open with a bayonet he'd carried since the war. Inside were three things: a worn journal, a folded map, and a bundle of photographs tied together with a strip of red cloth. He turned the journal's first page. The handwriting was hurried but clear. Robert Ellison, February 3rd, 2014. Elias frowned. That name again. May's missing fiancé. The entries told a fragmented story of a journalist investigating Draxon Minerals, a corporation accused of leaking toxic runoff into the Pine Hollow Reservoir. Ellison claimed he had proof of deliberate poisoning, but someone, he never named who, had been following him. His last entry ended abruptly. "If I don't return, Hollowspire holds the truth. The water remembers." Valor whimpered softly, ears pricked toward the far wall. There was another sound, faint, rhythmic, a steady dripping that echoed like a heartbeat. Elias raised the flashlight and noticed a thin stream of dark water seeping from the stone, pooling near his boots. He touched it with his fingertips. It smelled metallic. Not clean water. Something older. Above them, the castle creaked as if exhaling. Elias returned upstairs before dawn, his mind heavy with unanswered questions. He laid the journal beside the fire and studied the map, a web of tunnels beneath Hollowspire connecting to a river marked in red. Beside it, a single note. Murdoch knows. Sheriff Clay Murdoch, the same man who'd warned Elias not to buy the castle. He looked at Valor. "Guess we just found our next ghost." Meanwhile, in Pine Hollow, May Whitaker sat alone in her flower shop, rain tracing paths down the glass. She had finally decided to open the small wooden chest she'd kept locked for 10 years, the one filled with Robert's old letters. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the first envelope. The words were tender at first, then desperate. But halfway through the stack, she noticed something strange: ink marks that had been scratched out, entire lines redacted with thick black pen. And the paper? Some were newer than the rest, their edges unnaturally clean, as though someone had replaced them. May's breath caught. "Who would censor love letters?" she whispered. At the bottom of the chest was one last envelope, sealed but never opened. She tore it open, expecting Robert's handwriting. Instead, a single typed message stared back. "Forget Hollowspire, May. He died for something bigger than love." Her heart froze. Tears welled, but not of grief, of fury. Someone had been watching her even after all these years. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. For a moment, she thought she saw movement on the ridge, a lantern's faint glow from Hollowspire's upper windows. The castle was no longer asleep. That night, Elias couldn't rest. Every gust of wind carried the same whisper, threading through the halls, soft but insistent, as though the walls themselves were trying to speak. He followed the sound to the library where books lay scattered on the floor. One had fallen open, revealing a page marked in faded ink. "The voice beneath the stone will guide the one who listens." Elias closed the book slowly. Valor raised his head, ears tilted toward the far corridor, where the whisper grew stronger, almost human now, like a sigh behind the wall. "All right," Elias murmured, setting his jaw. "Then I'll listen." And as he pressed his hand against the cold stone, the whisper stopped, replaced by a faint pulse of warmth under his palm, as though the castle itself had a living heart. The walls of Hollowspire were not haunted. They were alive, and they had chosen him. The rain had stopped, but Hollowspire still dripped. Each drop that fell from its ceiling sounded like a clock, marking time for ghosts. Elias hadn't slept. He sat at the library table, the map spread before him. Robert Ellison's name etched in his mind like a wound that wouldn't close. Valor lay by the window, eyes half open, ears flicking at every creak in the dark. Elias had sent a scanned copy of the journal and documents to his old friend Noah Creed, a journalist now working in Denver. Noah had served beside him once during those nights in the desert when silence meant survival. His reply came within hours. "Eli, you've stumbled into something rotten. Draxon Minerals was under investigation 5 years ago. Then all files disappeared, erased by someone high up. Don't trust the sheriff. He's one of theirs." Elias closed the laptop, the faint glow painting the edges of the ancient shelves. "Murdoch," he whispered. The name felt like poison. At dawn, Valor started growling again, low, steady, staring toward the eastern wing. Elias followed, lantern in hand. That section of the castle had always felt colder, as though the air itself refused to move. The doors there had been locked since his first night, their hinges fused by time. But now, one stood ajar. He stepped inside carefully. The room beyond was a gallery of portraits, their painted eyes following him down the hall. Dust cloaked every surface, yet a faint scent of smoke lingered, fresh, recent. On the far wall, a door half open revealed the corridor May had glimpsed light from. Inside, footprints marred the dust. Someone else had been here. A thin sound rippled through the quiet. Not the whisper this time, but breathing. Elias turned sharply, pistol drawn. The light caught only stone and shadows. Then Valor barked once and lunged toward a corner. Beneath a collapsed tapestry lay an old uniform, a sheriff's coat, torn and stained with earth. In its pocket, Elias found a brass key and a note written in block letters. "If you find this, don't stay. The walls remember." He folded the note, eyes narrowing. In Pine Hollow, Sheriff Clay Murdoch stood before his office mirror, buttoning his uniform. His reflection looked tired, a man carved from secrets. On his desk lay a file marked Roe Elias Surveillance Report. He hesitated before locking it in a drawer. He'd warned the veteran not to buy that cursed land. Now he realized he'd made a mistake letting him live there at all. Murdoch's phone buzzed. A deep voice came through, smooth and cold. "Has he found it?" "Not yet," Murdoch muttered. "Make sure he never does." The line went dead. The sheriff stared out the window toward the ridge, where Hollowspire's silhouette rose against the clouds. Beneath his calm, guilt gnawed at him. 10 years ago, he'd been part of the search for Robert Ellison. He remembered the night vividly, the screams in the forest, the smell of burning oil, the order to stand down. He had obeyed, and a man had vanished. Now his sins were returning through the fog. By evening, Elias had gathered enough evidence to suspect Murdoch's involvement. The map from Robert's box matched geological surveys from Draxon's mining site. The tunnels beneath Hollowspire weren't just old passages. They aligned with the contaminated water lines leading straight into Pine Hollow's reservoir. He felt a pulse of anger. All those children who had fallen sick years ago, all those unexplained deaths. It had never been bad luck. It was design. Valor's bark shattered his thoughts. The dog stood by the broken window, tail raised, eyes burning gold in the lantern light. Outside, under the cover of twilight, a figure moved through the courtyard, tall, wrapped in a raincoat. Elias grabbed his rifle and moved to the doorway. "Stay, Valor." He stepped into the fog, his boots silent on the wet stones. The figure disappeared behind a row of crumbling statues. Elias followed, heart steady but alert. When he reached the courtyard's edge, the person was gone. Only the faint scent of lilacs lingered, and there, on the gate, lay another bouquet of flowers, white lilies and daisies, bound with the same silk ribbon. Elias exhaled softly. "May," he murmured. He hadn't seen her since the day he arrived, but somehow her quiet ritual had become the castle's heartbeat. He didn't yet know that, at that same hour, May was sitting by her window, reading a final letter she had never dared open. Inside, she found a photograph. Robert, standing beside Sheriff Murdoch, both smiling before the sign of Draxon Minerals Research Facility. The realization hit her like a blow. The sheriff hadn't just known Robert, he'd worked with him, and perhaps betrayed him. That night, Hollowspire refused to sleep. Every corridor hummed with soft vibrations, like echoes of unseen footsteps. Elias lit the lantern and wandered through the halls, notebook in hand, drawing sketches of the tunnels. Valor followed closely, occasionally stopping to sniff the air and whine at the walls. When they reached the great staircase, Elias heard it again, the same whisper from before, but now clearer, forming words that chilled his blood. "He's still here!" The voice came from nowhere and everywhere. Elias turned, flashlight sweeping across the corridor, landing on the far wall, where faint handprints shimmered in the light, pressed into the stone as if by someone trying to escape. He stepped closer, heart pounding, until the whisper faded back into silence. Valor nudged his hand gently. Elias crouched beside him. "We'll get to the truth, boy," he said. "Whatever this place wants us to see, we'll see it." Behind them, in the reflection of a cracked mirror, a shadow moved, tall, unmistakably human. But when Elias spun around, the corridor was empty. Only the whisper remained, lingering like breath. The storm arrived like a wounded beast, growling, relentless, clawing at the towers of Hollowspire. Lightning split the horizon, painting the castle in flashes of blue and bone white. The rain didn't fall. It slammed, drumming against the stained glass like angry fists. Elias Rose stood by the great hearth, watching the flames shudder each time thunder rolled through the halls. He had known storms before, in deserts, jungles, battlefields, but none had ever felt so alive. Valor stood near the doorway, fur bristling, tail rigid. A low growl trembled in his chest. Elias turned. "What is it, boy?" Before the words left his mouth, the front gate groaned. Then, a sharp clang, the sound of metal on stone, footsteps, several of them. He doused the lantern. The room fell into darkness, broken only by lightning seeping through the tall windows. He could see the shapes now, dark silhouettes moving through the courtyard, flashlights flickering like fireflies swallowed by fog. Men, 5 of them, armed. He grabbed his rifle, signaling Valor to heel. Together, they melted into the shadows of the stairwell, leading to the tower chamber. Elias's breath came slow, controlled. His mind measured the rhythm of the invaders' steps, too organized to be thieves. These were professionals. "Find the papers," one voice hissed. "Draxon wants everything burned." So it was true. They'd come for the evidence. Elias motioned to Valor and climbed the spiral stairs, silent as smoke. The tower room overlooked the valley, its high windows cracked by time. He set the rifle on the ledge and waited. The first man entered moments later, flashlight sweeping across the walls. Valor's growl echoed softly, then silence, then a sudden blur of motion. Elias struck like lightning. The rifle butt cracked against the intruder's jaw, sending him sprawling. The second man shouted, raising his weapon, but Valor lunged, knocking him backward. The two crashed against the stone floor, the man screaming as the dog's teeth sank into his sleeve. "Call them off!" Elias barked, grabbing the first man by his collar. The man's eyes were wide with terror. "You don't get it. They already know you're here. You shouldn't have opened this place." "Who's they?" "Draxon and the sheriff. They—" A gunshot thundered from below. The man stiffened, eyes glazing over as he slumped to the floor. Blood pooled around his hand. Elias ducked behind a pillar as more bullets ricocheted off the walls. The intruders had cornered him. He checked the magazine. 5 rounds left. "Stay close," he whispered to Valor. They moved through the smoke and dust, using the echoes to mask their steps. One assailant climbed the stairs, but a well-aimed shot sent him tumbling back down. Elias grabbed the fallen flashlight, its beam slicing through the haze, revealing papers fluttering through the air, pages from Robert Ellison's, journal torn and scattered. "Not tonight," Elias muttered. He shoved the pages into his satchel, slung it over his shoulder, and sprinted toward the crypt entrance. Lightning cracked, illuminating the stained glass. Saints and sinners frozen in eternal judgment. The air grew colder as he descended into the undercroft. Water dripped from the ceiling, each drop echoing like a heartbeat. Valor's nails clicked against the stone, his nose twitching. At the far end of the tunnel, another man stood, trembling, soaked, weapon lowered. "Don't shoot," the intruder rasped. "It's too late. You can't stop it." "Stop what?" Elias demanded. "The earth's poisoned. Hollowspire sits on the wound. The stone, it breathes." Elias took a step closer. "Who told you that?" The man gave a dry laugh, a sound too broken to hold fear. "You can feel it, can't you? Every night the ground moves. It's alive. Draxon didn't cause it. They just learned how to feed on it." Elias froze. The walls around them pulsed faintly. The sensation subtle but real, like the rhythm of a sleeping heart. Water seeped through cracks in the rock, glimmering darkly in the light. Valor whimpered. The air thickened, heavy with the smell of rust and earth. Before Elias could reply, the man lunged, trying to flee. Valor caught his coat, dragging him down with a snarl. His head struck the floor. Silence followed, heavy, breathless silence. Then, from above, came a distant thumping sound, rhythmic, mechanical. Helicopters. Elias pulled his radio from his vest. The line crackled. "Eli, it's Noah. We're overhead. Hold your position. The Bureau's inbound." He exhaled. "About damn time." He tied the unconscious intruder's wrists and climbed back toward the main hall. Rain poured through the broken windows, pooling around the marble floor. The castle groaned, each thunderclap sounding like a dying god's cry. And then, a voice. "Elias!" He turned sharply. Through the downpour, May Whitaker appeared in the doorway, soaked through, lantern clutched against her chest. Her face was pale but determined. "I saw the lights," she gasped. "The fire. I couldn't just watch from town." "You shouldn't have come here," Elias said, though relief softened his tone. She stepped closer, trembling. "You think I'd let you fight this alone? Robert wouldn't forgive me." Thunder tore through the air, shaking the rafters. A beam cracked and fell, shattering beside them. Valor barked, pushing May back toward safety. Outside, the helicopters descended, their lights slicing through the rain. Men in dark jackets poured through the gate, the letters FBI barely visible in the storm. Elias met May's eyes, the weight of 10 years of secrets burning between them. "It's ending tonight," he said quietly. But before they could move, a deep rumble rolled beneath their feet. Not thunder, this. Time, but something older, slower. The walls of Hollowspire trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. May clutched Elias's arm. "What is that?" He looked toward the floor, where the stones seemed to pulse, faintly rising and falling, like a creature breathing beneath their feet. "The truth," Elias murmured, "and it's waking up." Outside, the storm howled as though the earth itself had joined it. Hollowspire was no longer a ruin. It was alive, and it remembered. The storm had not passed. It only changed its voice. Instead of roaring, it whispered now, crawling through the broken windows of Hollowspire like breath through a grave. The smell of smoke clung to everything. Elias Rowe crouched beside Valor at the base of the central stairway, checking his last magazine. Above him, boots echoed against the marble floor as Draxon's men regrouped. From the shattered archway, the night pulsed with the rhythm of helicopter blades. The FBI had arrived, but so had reinforcements for the enemy, men desperate enough to destroy everything before the truth reached daylight. "May," Elias said softly, turning to her, "you see that tower?" He pointed to the spiral staircase that rose toward the great dome of wind and stone, a relic once used to measure storms. "Get up there and stay down until I call." Her lips parted. "And what about you?" "I'll keep them busy." She shook her head. "You can't face them alone." He gave a weary smile. "Wasn't planning to. I've got Valor." The German shepherd gave a low bark, as if understanding. May hesitated but obeyed, clutching her lantern as she climbed the narrow steps. Lightning flickered through the cracks above, throwing her shadow along the curved wall. Moments later, the first wave of intruders burst through the main hall. Elias opened fire. The gunfire cracked like thunder in a stone chamber. Valor darted between columns, snarling, driving the men into confusion. One slipped on the wet marble, another stumbled into a burning curtain. "Cover the west wing!" someone yelled. But Elias was already moving, pulling back toward the stairwell, using the castle itself as a weapon. Each corridor funneled sound and light, every echo turning truth into deception. Hollowspire had been built for grandeur, but tonight it was built for war. "Come on, you bastards," Elias muttered, taking aim again. "Let's end this." A grenade rolled across the floor, clinking once before Valor barked sharply and shoved Elias backward. The explosion tore through the gallery, hurling splinters and smoke. Elias's ears rang. Dust filled his mouth. He stumbled to his knees, blinking through the haze, and saw the intruders closing in. But then, through the storm, came a new sound. The whir of engines overhead, the shout of men outside the gates. Floodlights cut through the fog, painting the courtyard in harsh white. "FBI! Drop your weapons!" For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Then chaos erupted. Draxon's men scattered, some firing blindly toward the light, others retreating deeper into the tower. Elias grabbed Valor's collar. "Now, boy, let's finish this." They surged up the stairs toward the wind tower, bullets ricocheting off the stone. The air grew thinner, colder. Rain lashed through the shattered windows. At the top, Elias burst through the archway and found May cornered near the bell frame, clutching a metal pipe for defense. One of the intruders loomed over her, raising his gun. Elias didn't hesitate. 2 quick shots dropped him before he could turn. May gasped, then ran to Elias as he reloaded. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, trembling. "You're bleeding." He glanced down at his shoulder, a shallow graze. "Nothing that'll stop me." Below, more footsteps thundered upward. The last group was coming. Elias positioned himself by the window, wind tearing at his clothes. The storm was close enough to touch now, lightning dancing just beyond the tower's spire. Valor growled, crouched beside May, ready. When the first head appeared over the stairs, Elias fired again. The narrow space turned the fight into a trap. Each flash of gunfire illuminated faces twisted by fear. The tower shook under the weight of the storm, its beams groaning. Then, the sound of rotor blades growing louder. The FBI helicopter hovered just beyond the tower, floodlights sweeping across the battlements. Through his earpiece, Elias heard Noah Creed's voice. Eli! We've got them surrounded. Hold position. Copy, Elias breathed. And hurry. A final gunshot cracked. One of the intruders fell backward, tumbling down the spiral. Another raised his rifle, only to freeze as Valor leapt, knocking him flat. Elias seized the moment, disarming him and slamming the weapon aside. In the end, the last man standing was Sheriff Clay Murdoch. His face was pale beneath the flashes of lightning, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. He held his pistol steady, but his voice trembled. "You don't understand, Ro. You think this is about money? Draxon runs everything. You can't fight what's already won." Elias took a step closer, lowering his gun. "Then why are you shaking, Sheriff?" Murdoch hesitated, and in that pause, justice came roaring through the door. FBI agents stormed the tower, shouting commands. Murdoch dropped his weapon, hands raised. Outside, the storm began to break. Elias led the agents down to the underground chamber, where he'd hidden the evidence. Robert Ellison's journal, the contaminated soil samples, the maps linking Draxon to the poisoned wells. May followed, silent but steady, clutching the lantern like a relic. "This is it," Elias told the lead agent. "Everything Robert died for." The agent nodded, his voice firm. "We'll make sure it sees daylight." As they left the chamber, the first hint of dawn crept over the valley. The fires in Hollowspire were dying. Rain washed soot from the walls, revealing veins of marble that glimmered faintly in the gray light, like the castle itself was beginning to breathe again. May turned to Elias, tears bright in her eyes. "It's over." He shook his head softly. "No, it's beginning." She stepped closer, resting her hand on his arm. "Then let's make it mean something." Valor pressed his head between them, tail wagging. And weakly, the storm outside gave one last rumble, not of anger, but of release. For the first time in years, Hollowspire was quiet. The morning after the storm was a quiet no one in Pine Hollow had ever known. The wind had died, the rain had stopped, and the world felt as if it were holding its breath. The towers of Hollowspire stood dark against the soft dawn, scarred by fire and thunder, but still standing, defiant, enduring. Elias Rowe walked through the courtyard, boots crunching over broken glass and ash. Smoke rose gently from the great hall, carrying the scent of burnt paper and damp stone. Around him, FBI agents finished their work, photographing, collecting, sealing evidence that would travel far beyond this valley. "Ellison's files will make headlines," Noah Creed said, stepping beside him. He looked older than Elias remembered, maybe from sleepless nights, or the weight of seeing truth finally surface. "Draxon's finished. Murdoch will talk once he sees a cell instead of a badge." Elias nodded, his voice quiet. "Robert Ellison didn't die for nothing." Noah handed him a folder, edges damp from rain. Inside was a single photo. Robert and May, standing before Hollowspire years ago, smiling beneath a blue sky. "She should have this," Noah said. Elias took the photo, eyes tracing the faded smiles. "Yeah," he murmured, "she should." May Whitaker stood by the fountain that hadn't worked in decades, a blanket around her shoulders, her hair still damp. Valor lay at her feet, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but alert. The dog had become something more than a guardian now, a bridge between the living and the lost. When Elias approached, she turned and smiled softly. "You came back." "Didn't plan on leaving," he said. She laughed, a tired sound but full of light. "I thought once the storm passed, you'd disappear like it never happened." Elias shook his head. "The storm's the easy part. It's what comes after that matters." He handed her the photograph. Her fingers trembled as she took it. For a moment, the world around them stilled, just the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of engines in the valley below. May traced Robert's face with her thumb. "He wanted the truth to live," she whispered. "And it will," Elias said. "We made sure of that." She looked up at the castle, its scorched windows, its cracked stones, its stubborn refusal to fall. "You know, when I was little, they said Hollowspire was cursed, but I think it was just waiting for someone brave enough to listen." Elias glanced at Valor. "Then, I guess we both did some listening." By noon, the government convoys had left. their tire tracks carved into the muddy road down the ridge. Reporters would come soon, and investigators and workers in clean suits with instruments to measure what the earth had kept hidden. For now, though, silence returned. May walked beside Elias through the overgrown garden, sunlight piercing through the shifting clouds. "So, what happens next?" she asked. "I'll stay," Elias said simply. "There's work to be done. The ground's poisoned, the wells need restoring. I can't leave this place like this." "You're a soldier, not a builder." "Not anymore," he said with a faint smile. "Maybe it's time to build instead of fight." She stopped, looking up at him, her eyes catching the light. "And what if I stayed too?" He didn't answer at first. The air smelled of wet earth and wildflowers, the kind May once brought every week to the gate. "Then," he said finally, "we'd call this home." Her smile bloomed like sunrise. Weeks passed. The government declared Hollowspire and its lands a protected restoration zone. Engineers and environmental teams came and went, unearthing both secrets and beauty from the soil. Reporters called it the castle that spoke. For the people of Pine Hollow, it became something else, a promise that corruption could be undone, that the earth itself could heal. But for Elias and May, it became sanctuary. Together, they began to rebuild, clearing the gardens, restoring the broken fountain, repairing the windows one pane at a time. Valor oversaw it all like a patient king, his fur catching the sunlight, his presence steady and proud. At night, when the wind sighed through the halls, it no longer carried whispers of the dead. It carried laughter, the sound of hammers, of May's humming, of life returning to stone. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Elias stood on the balcony overlooking the valley. May joined him, wiping her hands on a linen cloth. Below them, Hollowspire shimmered with the soft glow of lanterns, light in every window for the first time in decades. "It's beautiful," she said. He nodded. "And quiet." She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "Maybe that's what peace sounds like." Valor barked once from the courtyard below, as if agreeing. The echo carried across the valley, a single sound of life against the silence of history. Months later, Hollowspire had changed. The castle's walls were repaired, the gardens blooming again, and the main hall turned into a refuge for veterans seeking solace. Above the doorway, May hung a carved wooden sign, "Hollowspire House, where the lost come home." Visitors often stopped to pet Valor, now grayer around the muzzle but still full of strength. Children adored him. The older soldiers called him the guardian of ghosts. Elias would just smile, scratching the dog's ears. He's earned his rest. As twilight fell, the lights of Pine Hollow began to glow far below, and the first stars returned to the sky. Elias and May stood hand in hand at the gates, the air cool and full of promise. The castle no longer whispered. It breathed, slow, steady, alive. Final message, the lesson of Hollowspire. In the quiet that followed the storm, Elias, May, and Valor discovered something greater than truth or justice. They found grace, the kind that does not roar but whispers through broken places. Hollowspire stood again, not because of power, but because love and faith refused to die. Sometimes God's miracles do not come with thunder or shining light. They come in the courage to rebuild, in the kindness we offer a stranger, in the loyalty of a faithful heart. Every breath, every sunrise, every second chance, that too is a miracle. In our daily lives, we all have our own Hollowspires, moments when the walls seem to crumble and the world grows dark. But remember this, no ruin is too far gone for God to restore. When we keep faith, He rebuilds us stronger than before. If this story touched your heart, share it so others may feel the same hope. Leave a comment below, tell us where you are watching from, and write Amen if you believe that miracles still happen. Subscribe to the channel to join our growing family of faith, love, and courage. May God bless you, protect your home, and fill your heart with peace. And may the light that shone on Hollowspire shine on you too, wherever you are.